And we're back, the Fans, Facts, and Feelings podcast. We got a special guest with us today. He hails from Lima, Ohio, former team coordinator of the Cleveland Cavaliers, manager of scouting for the Golden State Warriors for over 5 years, a scout for the Orlando Magic, the Los Angeles Clippers, and most recently the Sacramento Kings. Our first guest on the Fans, Facts, and Feelings podcast, Mr. Greg Stratton, ladies and gentlemen. Let's give it up for him.
Thank you. It's an honor. It's my honor to be the first guest on here.
Yes, well, hey, it's an honor to have you, man. You've done a lot. You have a lot of stories to tell. We want to get into some of those. We're going to get right into it. And I know that the only reason you are here with us today is because of your friendship with Bright. And so I want to get into that. Tell us that origin story. How did that friendship start?
Well, this is a great story. I was scouting at Rupp Arena. I think at the time I was working, was it the Clippers or the Kings? I can't recall. It might have been the Clippers.
He was with the Clippers.
Yeah. And I got there super early like normal. We're allowed in, scouts allowed in about 90 minutes before the game. I get in there to watch warm-ups, find some coaches to talk to. And I'm down under the basket, watching guys warm up, shoot, sometimes even take pictures or videos. And all of a sudden I hear someone say, "Psst, hey." And I turn around and there's this guy and he's standing underneath the basket and he's holding the wire for the ESPN camera. And the cameraman is there and there's Josh behind him. And then he says something to me along the lines like, "I'm trying to do what you're doing." He was like, "I want to be like you." And he was like, "I want to give you my information." And so he gives me his number. We kind of have some small talk real quick. And then we kind of maintain contact. And then he ended up coming to Portsmouth and some of these other scouting events. And here we are. That had to be, I don't know how long ago, maybe. What do you think, Josh? 10 years?
It's got a Facebook 10-year anniversary showing me with Tim Hardaway.
Oh, that's perfect.
But I was blown away by that because I was like, he wants to hustle. And I was like, he is willing to do whatever it takes to chase his dream. And after that, I found out he was well connected in the Lexington area, had spent a lot of time in Louisville. He was a great resource for me as far as some of the prospects, some of the players for UK and Louisville. And I was trying to tell him at the time, I don't know if you remember, I was trying to tell you how valuable that information is and like everything that you have to offer. So that's why.
Awesome. I love that. So yeah, definitely fortune favors the bold then, I guess, so to speak, right?
Yeah. He put himself out there.
And did it. Yeah, that's awesome. So you have extensive history in that industry, and there are some things that kind of stand out because I'm looking at the time you spent in Golden State. There was some success there. Most recently, we know that you were with Sacramento, and here that's lately been in the news. Somebody that's kind of been highlighted lately is Tyrese Halliburton. Were you part of that when Tyrese Halliburton was drafted? Were you involved in that?
Yeah, I remember when this was a COVID year, so it was 2020. The draft was delayed. It was in November. We just had a brand new executive staff come to Sacramento. Monty McNair was the GM, and he brought his own staff of people. I had been out the whole year scouting along with our other scouts, and then we had meetings going up to that. We kind of had to. We went over all the players. They hired some analytics people that were involved in all these conversations, and I was super high on him. When I saw him play in the Bahamas that year, what stood out to me was he made other players better. He just continued to make the right play over and over and over again. Even if his teammates wouldn't make shots, if his postman dropped the ball, he just kept making the right play. And as a scout, a lot of time I keep track of a lot of times shots created rather than assists, because the big thing is you creating shots for other people. And so I actually started referring to those as Halliburtons, because you may end up having, he could have 6 or 7 assists in a college game, but he might have had 14 or 15 Halliburtons, because you can't can't control if your teammate makes the shot. You can't control if your postman catches the ball. You just know you're trying to get the timing. You have the right timing to get him the ball at the right time to get a shot. And so I love the way, and I started thinking, man, if he gets around better players, he's going to really take off. And then I did all kinds of background intel on him, and everything that came back was super positive. Energy giver, lights up the room, people follow him, teammates love him. When he walks in the room, everyone, there's an energy about him that people love. And I think I'm super happy for him now, even though we ended up making a trade with Indiana. I still pull for him just because everything he's about, and I think you're starting to see his impact, obviously.
Okay, y'all picked him up at 12. So was it anticipated that were you thinking like he might not be around at 12, or were you thinking like?
Yeah, I was pumped. I mean, I couldn't believe what was happening, because I admit that I had him higher than a lot of people did, maybe even on our staff or even on staffs around the league. But the fact that I will say this, that's the highest, that's the best. Okay. When in my own rankings, I mean, that's the time he's the highest rated player that we ever drafted to the team that I work for.
Mm.
There's a lot of times, unless you're drafted in the top 1, 2, or 3, you're not getting the guy that you have up there. Rarely does someone slide. I mean, he slid. Now, how high other teams had him? Obviously, 11 teams didn't take him. So we were just pumped that we got him at 12.
That's awesome. So for the people out there that don't understand or don't know, haven't been privy to kind of how this whole process works, could you kind of take us behind the scenes of how you go about analyzing players? First identifying them, and then looking at them and analyzing them and ranking them amongst the others. Like, I'm not asking you for all your trade secrets, but kind of give us a brief kind of outline, familiarity with how that goes.
Yeah, you sit behind the scenes. I think that's the key thing. Like, this is kind of new. I'm not used to being on something like this, because all my work has always been done behind the scenes. And I think it's kind of, to people that don't know how long the process is, going way back, we're able to go to some high school events now, AAU tournaments, the Peach Jam, Adidas. Like, I just last week I was at the NBPA Top 100, where they try to identify the top 100 prospects in high school. And then we're able to see them a couple of times in the summer. And then, of course, we're not allowed to, you have to be 19 years old, and you have to be out of school 1 year before you get drafted. So by the time, some of these players, there was 2028s. I just saw high school class of 2028. So those kids are in the back of your mind, but they're just kind of in the back of your mind until you're able to see them on a consistent basis, right? And then by the time they're seniors, and everybody in high school is ranking them, and you got all the ranking high school websites that do all that stuff. Whether that's some of those things are accurate or not is I think to be debated. And how important and how important that is too. I mean, a great example of that to me is Keegan Murray, who I believe was ranked 320th maybe in his class, and ended up being the number 4 pick in the NBA draft. I mean, think about that. I mean, that's amazing. But as far as the process goes, we identify those players at a young age, just the top ones, and then we just continue to see them as they come along. And then even if you could play your way onto like someone like Keegan Murray, who wasn't highly regarded at a young age, and then just plays his way onto the boards and everything once he gets to college, So there's a lot of different ways you could get onto like draft boards. But the process is all similar. We try to see the players that we need to see. We try to do a bunch of intel, background, talk to resources, people that know them from high school, AAU, college, anybody that can really speak to them as people.
Wow, so you're like going back. You're talking to grandmas and aunties and all that type of thing?
Well, I don't know about talking to grandmas and aunties, because I think they'd probably be pretty biased. We're looking for unbiased sources.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. About their baby.
Coached against them and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, you could talk to principals, you could talk to athletic directors, you could talk to coaches. A lot of these kids have trainers now at a super young age. I mean, there's anybody that comes in contact with them that you would think would be a good resource. And I think the key thing is, like, you don't necessarily need a ton as far as the number of contacts, but you need to find the right ones. You need to find the trustworthy people behind the scenes that can really speak to these kids. Like when I was talking about the UK guys to my man B. Wright, he was.
There you go. Okay, very good. So he was getting something out of it, but you were getting something out of it
Oh
too.
yeah, yeah.
Bird
Very
dog
good.
scout, bird dog scout, baby.
Yes,
Right?
that's super important, man.
Yes.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, a point we was talking about earlier that you mentioned about Halliburton, it's so crazy because from afar, I always like to place myself in a position as the GM or a fan or a scout when I'm watching what teams need per year. I don't care if it's my team or any other team. That's why I'm so passionate about scouting, because I can look at your team per your play and see what you need per value, right? And so at the time, one of my family members was real close to Mr. Weaver, the general manager up in Detroit Pistons. And as it was going on, he just got the job, and was just seeing what he would do and like what I would do if I was him. And I was thinking Halliburton the whole time. And as it went on, and it was Killian Hayes, the French phenomenon. And so just thinking about how you did your work, how I did my work, and how that took place. I mean, and that happens. It happens, because I got mad respect and love for Mr. Troy Weaver and the organization. And sometimes, even though you're the GM, you don't always make decisions too. My guy knows that. But with that said, Halliburton, you trusted in lands in your lap. And I'm sure that's been something that happens all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we were lucky because, well, not only for him falling, but there were a lot of people in our organization, our analytics staff and our scouting staff were all kind of aligned when it come to, Halliburton, which is a good place to be. But like as a scout, your main job as a scout, I always tell people, is basically you collect information.
Right.
You collect information and you give it to your organization through a database or through word of mouth or doing reports or whatever. And then once you give that information to them, then your job is done, unless it comes to like rankings or, coming up to the draft when you're going to try to come up with a draft board and all that. So there's so much as a scout that's out of your hands.
Right.
That it can be frustrating at times. I mean, there's a big buildup for draft day. You spent 1 whole year working on these reports, and then stuff doesn't fall your way, or there's like not, or maybe your organization doesn't feel the same about a player as you do. The most important thing is when you walk out of that room, everybody's on board. And that's not always easy. I mean, I've been doing this 31 years, and there's a lot of times you don't always feel the same as everybody else, but you got to understand you're part of an organization. This is like being on a team. You're not always going to agree with your teammates. You're not always going to like your teammates, but you just got to know these are my guys, and this was our pick. So, but that one was easy because we were celebrating.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned like you've been doing this for 30 some odd years. I mean, LeBron James was probably like 9 years old when you started. That's how long ago you've been in the game. But tell us how you got started. I know you went to Bowling Green, and then from there you ended up in Cleveland. Like, tell us how that happened.
Yeah, I went to Bowling Green and I was in sport management. And I actually, when I went to college, I wanted to coach. I was just going to be a high school coach or whatever, but I didn't know what I wanted to teach. And at the time in Ohio, you had to teach in order to coach. So then I actually went to Cincinnati for a year and a half. And then I transferred to Bowling Green and got into sport management, I fell in love with the program. There was like 6 different areas that you could kind of study. Sports media, you could be on the training side, you could be enterprise, you could be like management. Mine was like on the management side. And I ended up being so lucky to do an internship with the Cavaliers. This was 1993, 94. So the Cavs team was playing at the Richfield Coliseum. It was Mark Price, Larry Nance, Brad Daugherty, that whole group,
Yes,
which
sir.
that was my first exposure to really the NBA like on a daily basis. So I learned so much, and I'm still in touch with some of these guys. Larry Nance and I still talk. Obviously, he's got sons that are playing in the NBA, but he was my first. I think I got spoiled because he was the definition of a pro basketball player to me when I was 23 years old. He is what it means to be a professional basketball player. You come to work, you do your job, you lead by example. You just always, your work ethic's great. He was phenomenal. And I learned within a few years that everybody wasn't like Larry, but I held him. I still think I compare to players like we interview and stuff to him because he was so far above and beyond everybody else when it come to him and Mark Price. That whole team was like that. So I ended up being in Cleveland for those 8 years. I got hired after my internship. We moved to the arena in downtown, which at the time was called Gund Arena, and then turned into Rocket Mortgage or whatever it is now.
Right.
Rocket Field House. I don't know what it was. Quicken Loans. It
Yeah.
changes all the time.
Right.
But
What
it was called Gund Arena at the time, and Wayne Embry, who was the general manager, president of the Cavaliers, actually hired me after my internship and gave me my first job. And I remember in my first couple of years, I worked for everybody in basketball. So I was like, the guy that did everything. So I worked for the coaching staff. I worked for, like, in the office. I worked for the director of player personnel. I worked for the trainer. I worked for the GM. So whatever, I assisted the director of player personnel in getting scouting credentials for the scouting staff. I helped our trainer do travel because back then the trainer did travel too. I helped the GM put together, he gave me so much responsibility, like eventually ended up talking to agents, and like I just learned the business from the ground up. It was, and I'm really thankful I had that experience in Cleveland. I even got to go to some games, local games. I went to Ohio State. I would go scouting with Wayne. Wayne would ask me what I was doing and then say, get in the car, we're going to go watch a game. And here I was, 24, 25 years old, working for someone who has been a legend in the NBA, is in the Hall of Fame. Actually, was during that time Wayne got inducted in the Basketball Hall of Fame, and I got to ride up on our team plane and go to that ceremony when I was just in my mid-20s. LeBron, you mentioned LeBron. He was just in high school. I remember one thing, they used to play these prelim games, St. Vincent's, or actually a lot of high schools, they set it up where if we played at, say, 7:30 on a Saturday night, then they would have a high school come in and they'd have a high school game play at like 4. And then the people that came to that game, they would buy tickets and get to stay for the NBA game. And actually St. Vincent St. Mary's was playing in one of those prelim games when LeBron was a freshman. And I thought, you know what, I was at shoot around that day, and I thought I'm just going to stay and I'm going to go to that game. And then our starting two guard was Wesley Person, and he asked me if I was staying and going to go to the high school game. I said, sure. So he said, man, I'm going to come sit with you. So I said, all right. So we sit there and watch the game. LeBron was just super thin, long, lanky. All he did was pass. Like, he was an amazing passer, just made play after play, played on the ball, got to the rim a bunch at the end of the game. They won the game, and we walked in the locker room, and I said, what'd you think, Wes? He said, man, I'm glad he ain't on our team. And I said, why? He said, man, I won't be playing much tonight. And I was like, you realize what you just said about a freshman in high school? And so that became, I got to see him numerous times after that since I was in the area, but I'll never forget when Wes said that.
So it was evident from his freshman year that he was, so to speak, destined for greatness.
The real deal. And he's still playing. Think about that. That's crazy.
And he had a starter in the NBA worried about his position in the 9th grade.
Yeah, a starter. And Wesley was pretty good, man.
Yes, that's wild. 23 years old, I think you said you came in. Was it hard to not fan out sometimes and just become oh my God, you're
man,
you.
I got so many stories about that. For instance, 1997, so I would have been like 27. I think that's the year we hosted the NBA All-Star game in Cleveland. That was the 50 greatest. I don't know if you guys might be too young to remember, but they had the top 50 players ever. They voted on this, and then everyone got a jacket.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And they gave them the jacket at halftime of the game. Well, the whole weekend, these guys were in Cleveland. And I was like,
Wow.
I had a pass and I could go anywhere, and I was in the locker room, and I remember the opening party on the first night. There's always a big league wide party, and it was held at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and it was also connected to the Science Center because keep in mind it's February in Cleveland, it's about zero, and it's connected to by an inflatable tunnel to the Science Center, so it was like all one big building, and I was in there, and Wayne told me to go to it, so I went, and you got to understand, everywhere you looked, it was like Bill Russell, Dr. J. It was just every single player that you could ever, and they were all standing there together. And I'm thinking, what the heck am I doing here? But I seriously, I was like blessed to be around these people, and Wayne would introduce me to them. And he wanted me to come to dinner with them like afterwards, and at dinner it was like Jerry Colangelo, Jerry West, Earl Monroe, Wayne, and there's me. And I'm going, I'm just taking it all in. I'm not saying a word.
Right.
Like I'm
Right.
just loving life. I had so many of those experiences. Terrell Brandon was an all-star that year, and I was close to him, so he invited me to his party, and my friends, I grew up about 3 hours away, so they're coming up to go to that with me, and they can't believe they're here. Like, I remember actually at Terrell's party, we were there, and Lisa Leslie was there, and Ray Allen was there, and they were super young. They were just starting like in the NBA at the time, but they were really good players. And I was just like, wow, I'm just taking all this in.
Favor, man. That's favor.
Yeah.
That's
Amen, brother.
yes, sir. So you mentioned Lisa Leslie, and I want to use that as a good segue. I would like to ask you about your involvement with the WNBA.
Yeah. This is this part of my experience I never anticipated having, number one. But it was a great experience. And now when I talk about it, people like, I tell other NBA scouts about this, and they're like, really? 1997, I believe it was, when the WNBA first started. It was a Friday. I was sitting at my desk in my office, and Wayne Embry comes by my office, and he's got a big box of VHS tapes, and he drops it on my desk, and he says, have a good weekend. And I said, what are these? And he said, those are all women players. And I said, what? And he said, I just found out we're going to have a women's team. And he said, and if anything has my name on it, it's going to be good. And he said, I need you to come back on Monday, and I need a ranking, and then we're going to go through all these tapes. And that was our start of the Cleveland Rockers, which was one of the first 8 teams in the WNBA. And then I was part of the draft. But people don't realize there was no additional staff added other than a coaching staff and the training staff. So the managements for all those teams, Houston, Utah, LA, Cleveland, were the same GMs that were running the men's team.
Are you
For all,
serious?
yeah, for the men, not like it is today. So Wayne was the general manager of the Cleveland Rockers, and we drafted this girl, a woman, Isabel Fijakowski. In our first year, we got allocated a player, Michelle Edwards, who was a really good player already from Iowa. I remember all these names. We had this girl, Eva Nemkova, who was a really good player. Actually, our point guard was Susie McConnell Serio, who was actually the aunt to TJ McConnell. She was from Pittsburgh. Also on that staff was Jenny Busek, who is on the staff right now for the Indiana Pacers, which I see her all the time. And she actually was on the staff of the Kings with Dave Yeager when I was with the Kings. So was talking to her about her days playing in the WNBA, but I'm actually really happy because now it's taken a while, but the WNBA, the popularity with it now, more and more people seem to be following the WNBA, so I'm happy.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I told you I'm born and raised in Houston.
No,
So
they were
yeah,
good. They were really good.
I mean, there were grown men walking around with WNBA jerseys on, Houston Comets jerseys on. That's when I knew. I was like, this is serious. This is big time. I
Serious.
never imagined that I would see like these big men walking around with these women's jerseys on, but that's how good they were, and they were impactful, and the community loved them. They might as
Man,
well be Rockets.
No, yeah, Carol Dawson, who was the GM of the Rockets, was the one putting together that team. I remember being on the phone with him during the original draft. Him and Wayne going back and forth. They were good, man. Nobody could beat them.
That's phenomenal. Hopefully, Tillman can find a way to bring him back. I think he's working on it.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
I heard the same thing. I read something recently where they're talking about potentially bringing the Cleveland franchise back, but I don't know how true that is.
That would be good. I mean, with the increase in viewership and everything, I think if it's a time, now is the time. People are ready for it. So back when you started, there wasn't social media and things like that. How has that changed the job, changed the landscape of the?
Well, I think back in the '90s, there was still a chance. Like if you liked a player, if you found some player at a smaller D1 school or a D2 school someplace, and you liked him, it was kind of you could kind of keep it quiet, right? And I don't. That just doesn't happen anymore. I mean, the whole Scottie Pippins of the world type of thing. It's impossible. I mean, not only is there social media or like people want to be known, everybody wants to be known, so people are putting out their own things. I mean, people are getting onto to lists by putting their own stuff on YouTube, and there's people watching that. So it's like just recently, yesterday, I had been having a shoulder problem. I was at PT for it, and the guy knew that I was a scout, and he said, "So, are there any players that you've seen that have actually made it?" I was like, "Have you seen anybody?" I said, "I've seen every player, basically, the U.S. player that's been drafted for the last, 30 years, 25 to 30 years. Most of them live, right? So it's like once the word's out about a player's good, and then now if a player's at a small school, well, you don't have to worry because next year he's gonna be at another school. And with the portal and everything, anybody that's really good, like that's playing at a low or mid major, is going to transfer up, and then you're going to see him multiple times. You might see him at a Belmont or something like that, just in case, because you already like them, and then all of a sudden they're playing at a high major. So it's definitely changed the amount of information that's out there, how easily stuff gets out. It's definitely a different world than it was in the '90s.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. And so now it's changed everything, but I guess you've been able to adapt and find your way through that. Does it feel like do you have to travel as much? Do you have to go out and see people as much, or can you kind of intake things use online and your computers and things
Well,
like
yeah,
that?
that's a great question, because with all these new apps and everything like Synergy's changed everything for so many people. Like, to think that you could just go online right now and watch a game that was just completed earlier today in some, long off place on the other side of the world, and you can just watch that, and it's already broken down in every play type. It's broken down by defense, it's broken down by player. Everything is online where you could actually watch it. And so that's totally changed things. So much more is done on video. But I'm an old school guy. I mean, I'm an old school guy, and I like to see players live. And I think there's a lot about seeing a player play live that you can't get off video. A lot of it's, to me, is like player to player interaction, player to coach interaction, player to referee interaction. I watch all of that. I watch players interacting with fans. I watch a lot of this stuff you don't get on video, because when you're watching video, it's just following the ball. You're just watching the ball. You're not watching off the ball. You're not watching what the player's doing when he comes to the bench. You're not watching if there's some interaction on the bench with the coach. So I think it's super important that you're able to go see players play live. And then to your question about the traveling part, I think it all depends on where you live. And I happen to live in one of the best places in the country. I mean, I'm from Ohio, so it may sound like I'm biased, but I actually have done a lot of research into where the top players play and where can you live where the top players are guaranteed to come to you. And I mean, 2012, I sent out something to all the GMs in the league that was showing if you lived in Cincinnati, because of the conferences that you're able to get to within a short, like a radius of that area, that they all come to you and you actually don't have to pay. You don't have the expenses of flying. Like in town, we have the Big 12, we have the Big East, we got the SEC at multiple places, Lexington, Knoxville, Nashville. We got the ACC in Louisville. We got the A10 in Dayton. We got the Big 10 at Indiana, or State. So it's like, and then a whole bunch of smaller conferences.
Right.
So at the time that I did this big research into this, I went back like the previous 3 years drafts, and you could have seen 86% of all the U.S. kids that were drafted by never flying.
So I'll put you on the spot. Is it safe to say that the best basketball is played in the Midwest?
Well, right now, because now with the Big Ten, with the Big Ten the way it is, in the Big 12, we have UCLA coming, we have USC coming, we got Oregon coming, Washington coming, Arizona coming, Arizona State. So it's like now the top schools in the West are actually coming to the Midwest. So it actually, in the last couple of years, has actually gotten better than it was. I mean, keep in mind, though, it's taken away these great trips to California when the bad weather rolls around that I used to look forward to every year. About February, I'd say, it's about time to go to the West Coast for about a week. And now they're all coming to me.
So speaking of that, do you have any like funny travel stories that you could tell us about?
I got travel stories for days. And I'm actually,
How long you got?
oh no, I might have to come back on here for a few of them. But
Hey, we're gonna hold you to that.
But I've often joked that at the end of when I'm done doing this, I'm going to write some book. Because you know what? The fun part for me is I love going to the games and the traveling and getting to see different parts of the country and interact with people that live in different states. And one thing that I was completely floored by is just how incredibly diverse our whole country is. Like, from people to the topography and how people live, the cities to rural areas scouting has taken me to 47 states, and it's taken me to Europe, and it's taken me to China, and it's taken me to Japan. And it actually makes you really appreciate everybody for the different areas just for what they are. I mean, a lot of these stories, it takes something to spark my memory, and then some story comes. But I mean, as far as like traveling and going to like different gyms, I used to love to go to different places. Like Allen Fieldhouse is probably still my favorite gym in the country. I remember the first time I went there, I had never been to Lawrence. This was early in my scouting career. And I went to the gym, and it's old and historic, and it's got the old cement, and inside the hallways are the original concourses. So it's not like some new place, right? Got older concession stands. And then you got kids that were like holding the ropes when the players come out of the locker room to run out on the court, like you would see at a high school game. This is at Kansas, and they're getting all these kids out of New York, all the big cities in the country, to come to Lawrence, Kansas. And I'm going, why would you come from New York to go to Lawrence, Kansas? And then then they tipped it off. And then you're like, when you see the importance of what basketball means to the people in Lawrence, Kansas, you think this is exactly why they came here, because it means this much. And Josh could appreciate that. Same with Rupp. I mean, kids are coming from all over the place, all over the world, to come play basketball at Kentucky. And is it to live in Lexington? No. Is it to it's just the importance of, it's what it means to the community, to the city, to the state, to the people there, and they're going to hold it in high regard.
Absolutely.
And since you started, how have you seen the international interest and development of basketball internationally compared to the United States?
Well, it's just, I mean, the NBA became the leader back when I first started. They were at the forefront of being the leaders in the world in basketball, obviously, at that time. But then the popularity of basketball just gained throughout the entire world. A lot of people credit like the Dream Team in 92 and like how that kind of made basketball take off all over the world. Now, when you go to, like last summer, I was in Finland and for and it's just amazing at the talent level. I mean, you could sit in there for a week watching these kids come from all countries all over. At that point, it was just all over Europe. But But it's like, wow, that kid, like you'll see it in this year's draft. A lot of these kids that are going to be drafted this year, and this year's draft played in that tournament last year. And you're just like, it's just amazing. I mean, some of the kids that come out of France and Spain and Germany, and there's some couple of good kids in Israel. There's like, you realize it's all over the world.
So developmentally, is there any differences that you see as far as like how are some players come in more pro ready than others, or are there things that they focus on more in other places than others, or how does that work out?
Well, our, youth basketball in our country is dominated right now by AAU. Yeah, every kid plays high school, but it's like AAU is where kids kind of make their mark. And I think in other countries, the kids will move away, go play for a club team at a young age, and then stay there and kind of be developed on a junior team before they actually play for the senior team. And they're practicing every day. It's kind of like their way of life. They're also going to school, but it's like they actually kind of learn how to become pro players at a young age. And I think that brings a certain maturity, like moving away from home, having to take care of yourself. I remember I had an in-depth conversation with Peja Stojakovic about that, because he left home at a super young age. I think he was like, don't quote me, but I think it was like 14 or something, to go play professionally, like for a junior team. And then he was basically never went home. You know what I mean? Like he was basically playing basketball then from that point on. And I think that's kind of like a difference. I think the coaching in these other countries is really good. Guys really work at it. You could tell when you go to these other international tournaments just how fundamental the kids are and learning the game. But then, when they get over here, and there's been a great, I mean, if you look at the All-Star, think about next year what they want to do. I think I saw with the All-Star game where they want to play U.S. versus international. There's so many good international players in the NBA. It's like a lot of times, what's really cool is you forget where people are from. You just know that they're good hoopers. You know what I mean? Like in the NBA, you don't, every time you watch somebody like Joker or something, you just don't automatically think in the back of your mind, like where he's from or anything. You just know that he's a very good basketball player or the MVP.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a friend of mine not long ago, we were talking about, and we're like, hey, these kids now, they grew up playing in the gym. But like back when you started scouting, a lot of those guys that you were scouting, they grew up playing in the park, on the court. And so have you seen a difference in the style of play of those kids that kind of grew up playing in the gym versus the ones that grew up on the playground?
I don't know. I don't know if there's a real difference in this style of play. I will say the kids that I think sometimes these young kids take it for granted how much access they have to gyms and facilities, and the fact that they could have access to a gym or whatever whenever they wanted. And I think sometimes they don't fully take advantage of the fact that I mean, when you say that to some kid nowadays, he'll like look at you like you're crazy, like if you're going to go play outside someplace. You know what I mean? And it used to just be that you just played wherever you could.
Right.
I mean, whenever you found somebody to play with, but now everything is so organized. Everything is so organized that kids don't really have a lot of free time. It's like every time is almost already counted by their coach or workout. They have these trainers. I'm going to do this, and this. And it's like, even when you ask college players about, if you ask a coach about what a player likes to do in his free time, he's like, well, our guys don't have much free time. Like, because they're expected to be in there, right? Like if you got to come in early to shoot, and then you're going to have practice, and then you're staying after to shoot, and then you're in the training room, and then then they expect you to come back in the evening, and you're doing a personal workout in the evening and everything. So I think a lot has changed as far as like what's expected of the kids compared to when I was young. I know when I was young, even probably when I started in the NBA.
All this life.
So is
Yes,
it harder
exactly.
right? Is it harder to I guess fall between the cracks now than it was in the past?
Yeah, I would say, as far as you mean, if you're a talented player, as far as people missing out on you or not finding you, yeah. I think I tell people all the time, I tell young kids, like, if you're good enough, someone will find you now. I'm confident in that. There's not a lot of situations where where someone's not gonna word's not gonna get out that this kid was, I mean, basketball is a small world as far as the people that are connected. And so there's different levels. I know this person knows this person who's this junior college coach, right? And then he'll say, "Oh, you got to check out this guy. He plays at so and so junior college." Next thing you know, like I'm saying, he'll be at another school. Then there's 20 scouts there.
Right.
Like it can happen that fast. As far as like once somebody's onto you and sees you, then word gets out. Then all of a sudden, half the teams in the league have seen you play live.
Okay.
Like these kids, I think the kids don't really. I'll call them kids. I'm old, but I mean the players prospect. I don't think they really understand like how much they're being watched. Like if there's one thing that if people ask me all the time, what would you say to like young prospects or college prospects or high school prospects? My thing is someone's always watching. I will stay after and be the only person in the gym and everybody's gone, and just to see what kids do or who's the last one in there. Who's out there shooting on his own and rebounding his own shot? Who's like, I watch that in a game. I'm watching that in a warm up. You see, sometimes there'll be a best player on a team, and he'll be out there shooting, and then everybody runs in the locker room like they're supposed to, and he's out there getting in 4 extra shots on his own. And to me, that's a sign that that player loves hoops.
Intangibles.
Yeah, love
What would you
intangibles.
say to that young player who's just trying to get on, trying to get noticed? What things could he do to improve his chances of really getting up?
I mean, you flat out have to be talented. If you don't say that first, you're misleading people. I used to think you had to have one in order to make in the NBA. You had to have one NBA skill, something that you did on a level above everybody else that would, that was your legitimate NBA skill. Now things have changed so much
That's how it used to be, Greg.
Yeah, but things have changed so much since the 90s when I first started this. Back in the 90s, it was like everybody had a different role, everybody had a different position, and 2 guards scored, and point guards passed, and power forwards rebounded, right, and played defense, and the scoring for a power forward was a bonus, and centers scored around the rim and blocked shots and rebounded. And now, because of how basketball has changed, I think analytics has played a part in it. It's more, can you do more things at a high level consistently? Are you a versatile player? Like you look at these teams that are in the finals, look at Oklahoma City, Indiana, even they got versatile players. They got players that can guard multiple positions. They got players that can shoot, handle, pass, all of them. And so it's like, can you play with different lineups? Can you play different pace? Can you play, so I think that's what's become important. Like if you're asking me what's most important for a young kid, I would say to be consistent, reliable, accountable. Those things come to mind. Are you putting up numbers consistently? Are you one that's going to, score 25 and then the next game you get 2 and then, they can't count on you. I think that's really important. And then accountability, like I love the accountability piece. It's like, I put that kind of in there with the self-awareness, and some of this stuff is intangibles, not actually on-court stuff, but are you aware of your game? Are you aware of your weaknesses? Are you trying to get better in those? Are you delusional about who you are as a player? I'm not going to get into names, but I've interviewed a lot of NBA people at the combine, and when you say, well, who's your game like? Or, is there someone that you comp yourself to? And some of the names that some of the guys are, wow, you wouldn't believe. Everybody's KD. The 10 years ago, every single player was KD. And I was like, really? There's not very many KDs. Mm-hmm. Like, you got to know your own game and be good at it. That's what people want.
Come on.
Gotcha. Knowledge itself.
I know my role and I play it well,
Mm-hmm.
You got to play it well. And that's another thing, big guy, that I think that has separated you from other scouts just from our conversations. We've always talked, and you've always stood out by finding sleepers and diamonds in the roughs and guys that make up, the OKCs of the rosters and these, the guys that people are passing on because they're not highly ranked, they're not highly touted, but they play their role and they play positionless. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's been the difference, because anybody can scout a lottery pick, a top round pick, but can you go get that guy that is underrated and underappreciated and get those intangibles and then bring them on and he be that role player? And there's so many guys that fill that role. I think of DeAnthony Melton back in the day when I was really, really into scouting. And to see that I had him as one of my sleepers and to see what he's done, those kind of guys get devalued, but they are really what makes you a winning and championship team when you have guys like that. And I think as a scout, you doing that and being in that position has made you have your longevity and be great for real.
Well, I think the longer you do, to your point, I totally agree with you, Josh. Like the longer you do this, the more you get into that, because you're right. Anybody can pick a lottery pick. Anybody. Right. I mean, but you look at OKC with like Caruso and Kenrich Williams and Dort, even players like Dorian Finney-Smith. A great example for this with the Kings was Keon Ellis. I mean, Keon Ellis, and I don't deserve any of that credit because I saw him play in college, and did I ever think that he was going to start games for the Sacramento Kings? I admit that no. But it's a testament that there was people on our staff that did, or maybe they didn't envision him starting, but they envisioned him making a team. And we signed him. He played in the G League for 2 years. And he, to his credit, his character, his work ethic, his willingness to play whatever they want him to play, whether that was like on the ball, off the ball, he just played hard. He just played defense. He just realized, if I play defense and I make shots, I'm going to get a chance to play. And I think the longer you do this, that becomes the challenge. Who's that guy? Who I want to spend the whole year going to see those guys. I would know some other guys that have worked for teams that didn't have a draft pick, and I have never been in that position. Well, maybe once or twice, but they actually went out and tried to spend the whole season on finding undrafted players. And I think that's it's great. I think the organizations are best that once the scouts identify these guys, like Miami's done a great job with that through the years too, is you have to trust your scouts. And you have, as the management for those teams, you got to know that you got good people that are doing the work, and then saying, we're going to go sign this guy. Because it's important to be aggressive. Like as soon as the draft is over, trying to get that guy a part of your program, saying, we're going to take you to summer league. We're going to give you an E10 or whatever, a two-way. If you feel right away that the guy is good enough to be a two-way, give it to him right now. And then take him to summer league. Or if you see a guy in summer league that you like and he's playing for another team, go after him.
Right.
I mean, go sign him. You see that the teams that are really aggressive, that trust the people that have been seeing them, will do that. Like guy goes off in summer league for like maybe 3 or 4 games, but he's got no contract other than like a summer league contract or a E10 or something. Go sign him.
Go get him.
And then
go get him.
Yeah, then all of a sudden that kid's on your team, that guy's on your team for 10 years, and everybody's like, thinks you're a genius.
And with that said, Strato, this is just my argument and my opinion. I understand that GMs and owners have the last say so, okay? But to me, it does you no good to have scouts to watch thousands of games and hours and spend time doing this and then not trust them upon their evaluation. I mean, because at the end of the day, like you see that happen time after time where you put in the work and you know it, and you watch this guy, you tell him this guy, and then you in this draft night, or it's a decision on free agency, and they totally go in another direction. And so I think that the organizations that don't do that, for example, are probably, the ones that have the most success, because it makes no sense to have that take place and then you just take your power, but not your quote unquote expertise, because you got to trust in the guys that are out there. So I think, just moving forward, NBA GMs, presidents, organizations, trust your scouts that are grinding all day, every day. It makes no sense to, do the opposite when that's the process of it. So if that's going to happen, you might as well just watch tape yourself and go and hire some kind of advisor or someone and do that and just fire every scout you got. I mean, it makes no sense to not get the guys that you guys watch in and day out. And I think that's the difference between organizations that are for real and are family and those that are just a business.
Yeah, I will say this in their defense, there's a lot of factors that go into whether you're able to go get a guy, and a lot of like roster. Do you have a roster spot? Do you have too many players at that position? So there's a lot of factors that go into whether you can actually go get somebody. But I agree. Like if you're a really good organization and you see a player that you think can help you, then figure it out. You know what I mean? Like go get them and figure it out later, because talent, what we're trying to do is acquire talent.
Exactly. Absolutely.
And so, how much does your approach change as you change organizations? Is that something that varies depending on where you are?
Yeah, definitely. Like every organization is different. People ask me a lot of times, since I work for 5 different organizations, like how each one is different. And I would always say NBA organizations are as different as the owners, as different as every personality there could be. Like, and they're run differently according to that owner's, expertise, or like way he would run a company, and then who he hires, decisions he makes to hire GMs or presidents or whatever. And then it ultimately comes down to the general manager and what the philosophy is for that particular GM. Like style of play, how are we trying to play, along with the coaches, like he's working on this with the coaching staff on the side about what type of players they want. I remember when I was in Orlando, we had really good kind of, I guess you would call it, synergy between the front office staff and the coaching staff. So Otis Smith was the general manager and Stan Van Gundy was the coach. And we would actually have Stan in our meetings, like a training camp, talking about what kind of players Stan likes, what kind of players are best in the way his style of play, so that when we go out and go scouting, we're making sure that these guys are going to fit in with how he wants to play. Because I can name plenty of examples in the NBA where that doesn't happen, where there's not a lot of synergy between the front office and the coaching staff, and then you may end up drafting a player that you love as a scout, but then he's misplayed, or he's played out of position, or you're not playing him to his capabilities, to his strengths, when you've seen him play for 3 or 4 years in college and know he's capable of this. And then like, let's say he's a great ball handler, facilitator, passer. And then all of a sudden he gets on your team and they put him in the corner and just expect him to shoot threes. I've seen that. Even guys going from team to team to team. That's happened in the NBA, where a player like that was with us in Orlando, and then all of a sudden he was in another team and he was not as good. And people are calling me saying, "What happened?" I said, "What happened? How about you're not playing him the right way? Like, you're not even playing him to his strengths."
Right.
Okay. And so, with that being said, do NBA organizations, do they scout players from other teams and anticipating that and seeing like, this guy might be misused, and
Yeah.
let's
Oh, yeah.
look at him.
Yeah. NBA teams have a college scout. Well, they call it amateur. As I told them this year, I said, "There's no amateurs anymore," but they call it amateur. I said, "This is all pro basketball now."
Come on.
But we have amateur staff and then a pro staff. So at the same time, we're going out to a bunch of college games. They're all going to NBA games and G League games. And, there's like 2 or 3 guys maybe for every organization that are like going and watching teams in the preseason, especially when a lot of guys are getting a lot of run that they may not get during the season. And then, keeping careful notes on these guys that they think are undervalued, underutilized, or kind of like utilized the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are guys, every organization's got people doing that. So in case, like, let's say you go to make a trade and the trade doesn't work, or you need different salaries in a trade, that you go after one of those guys and they're going to throw him in because, he's not playing much, or you envision a better role with your team. Definitely.
Got it. Man, I know we've taken up a lot of your time. Really appreciate it. But before you go, I'd like you to give us maybe a piece of advice for someone that's trying to break into the industry, someone who's a young Josh Bright that's trying to that wants to be a scout, that's trying to figure out how to make their way in it. What's some advice that you could give them?
Number one, you have to network a lot. You have to, and Josh has done that. Obviously, I'm on this show, and he can speak to that. He's networking right behind in his picture there with Coach Knight. But that's important. I think it's important to be humble. I've come across a lot of young people that are trying to break into the business that want to kind of tell you how much they know and about their, almost like they know more about the NBA than you do. And so I think it's important to be prepared. I think it's important to be prepared without stepping on people's toes. We've had some good interns. One of them went to work for Memphis from Sacramento, and he was one of the best kids. His name's Eric Rubenstein. He was one of the best I'd ever seen at knowing what was like being in a room. Let's say there's 12 people in there, NBA executives, scouts, and he's like the intern that's just sitting there kind of taking notes, right? And like he would be super prepared so that if somebody said, well, hey, Eric, write this down so that when you leave here, we got it. He'd be like, oh, I got it. I already did that. I did that. He would anticipate what was going to be needed and have it done before the meeting. But then he didn't walk in there and speak up until someone actually said something to him about it. Because he wasn't in there about to show everybody up as a 23-year-old kid. But he was like reliable and accountable and just would do whatever you want him to do. And half the time he already had it done. So he became, I think back to when I started, like I used to joke that he was like 10 times better than me as an intern. But I just remembered when I was that age, I wanted to be humble and I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn. I wanted to be around people that were really good at what they did, whether that was scouts, coaches, GMs, and just sit there and learn rather than like always feel like I was supposed to be offering something. And I was so blessed to work for so many people at Cleveland, at Golden State, Orlando. Everywhere I had mentors, Otis Smith, Wayne Embry. I worked for Chris Mullin, Gary St. Jean with the Warriors. I worked for great people, Peja Stojakovic, Monty McNair, Vlade with the Kings. Gary Sachs was one of my close friends was the VP of the Clippers. Like these people were people that I learned from like all the time. And so I think you have to be willing to be humble and learn, but also be prepared when you're asked.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. You're really blessed to have an awesome career, and we wish you the best as you move forward. And we're thankful and blessed to have you on. Just thank you, man.
Yeah,
Thank you.
man. No problem. Yeah. I am blessed. I want to put that on the record. I'm super blessed. I'm super grateful. I've been able to meet some great basketball minds but also be around great people, which I think is super important that you trust the people that you're around as well. And I've been put in great situations. And so thank you for having me as your first guest. And who knows, maybe I'll come back and I'll have some more stories.
Yeah, we look
Get some
forward
good
to it. We got
stories.
open door policy, man. Anytime you want to come on, come on. And when you write that book and you go on that book tour, don't forget about us.
Oh, I'll be there.
All
I'll
right.
be in Houston, H-Town.
There you go. Let's
And
do it.
look, the draft is coming up soon, and we probably gonna have a segment too. So we need you to maybe chime in and comment and tell some things. We know you're a busy man and on the grind, but we definitely want your expertise per what not particularly on players, because I know it's confidential within that, but just as far as just the rankings and the people you think is going to be stars, a diamond in the rough. We want to get your insight.
Sounds good. A funny note to close on, how the draft is now 2 nights. It's like one night's the first round. To your point, when you were talking about hidden gems and all this, last year was the first time for that two-night thing, right? And so Monty McNair, our GM in Sacramento, I said to him, we were sitting there, and I said, hey, Monty, I said, I'm just going to come on Thursday night. And he said, what? I said, yeah, I'm going to skip the first round. I said, I've always been a second round type of guy. And I said, I'm trying to find good players in the second round. That's the challenge. And he was like, oh no, you're coming. You'll be here on Wednesday night with everybody else.
There you go.
No breaks.
I almost wanted to say I'll come after the draft and then we'll find some gems, take them to summer league and put them on our team.
There you go. There you go. We
All right.
definitely wish you the best, Greg.
Thanks, Satch.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Be Right. Thanks, Be Right.
We salute you, man. Take care, bro. Be blessed.
All right. Take care.